The statement landed in the quiet, climate-controlled air of their minimalist living room, not with a crash, but with the chilling finality of a guillotine's blade. "What's mine is mine," Chloe said, her voice a smooth, polished stone. She was admiring her new watch, a sliver of platinum and diamonds that cost more than the car Liam drove. "And what's yours is ours." She glanced up at him, a faint, condescending smile playing on her lips, the kind one gives to a simple child who has just been taught a fundamental, unassailable rule of the world. She thought he was simple. She thought his quiet nature was a lack of ambition, his patience a sign of weakness. Within 3 months, she would learn that his patience was not weakness, but a long, slow gathering of strength, and that his silence had been the careful, methodical construction of a fortress she could never hope to breach. She just didn't know it yet. We've all been there, haven't we? In a moment where you feel underestimated, where your worth is measured by the wrong scale. If you've ever felt that, I know you're going to want to see how this unfolds. So go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, because you're part of this journey now. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, let's get back to it. Liam felt a strange calm settle over him. It wasn't resignation, it was clarity. For 5 years of marriage, he had accepted the unspoken terms of their union. He, the steady but unremarkable architect at a large firm, was the foundation. He paid the mortgage on their beautiful city apartment. He covered the utilities, the groceries, the shared car payments, the holidays. He was the bedrock upon which Chloe, a senior marketing executive at her father's luxury lifestyle brand, could build her glittering life. Her substantial salary, her bonuses, the generous gifts from her parents, those were hers. They funded her designer wardrobe, her art collection, her exclusive gym membership, and now, this watch. His income, respectable by any normal standard, was simply absorbed into the machinery of their shared existence. It was the ours fund. Her income was the mine fund. He had allowed this imbalance to persist out of a misguided sense of love, a belief that partnership meant providing a stable base for the one you love to fly. He had mistaken her flight for a shared journey. Now he saw it for what it was. She was flying away from him, using his shoulders as a launch pad she never intended to revisit. He looked at her, truly looked at her. The woman he had fallen for was a vibrant, ambitious person. He had admired her drive, but somewhere along the way, that drive had curdled into a sense of entitlement, her ambition into arrogance. She wasn't just his partner anymore. She saw herself as the CEO of their marriage, and he was a salaried employee with no stock options. The condescending smile was still there, waiting for his placid nod of agreement. He gave it to her. "Of course, Chloe," he said, his voice even. "That seems perfectly fair. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is ours. I understand." Her smile widened, satisfied. She had won a negotiation he hadn't even realized they were having. She turned her attention back to the watch, twisting her wrist to catch the light, the conversation already forgotten, dismissed as a minor piece of household administration. But for Liam, it was not an ending. It was a beginning. In his mind, a switch had been flipped. A contract, unspoken for years, had just been explicitly stated and formally accepted. And a contract, he knew, works both ways. He thought about the worn leather journal in his briefcase, the one she always dismissed as his doodling book. Inside it were not just doodles, but blueprints for buildings that would reshape skylines, designs for homes that were whispered about in the highest echelons of wealth, and a meticulously detailed plan for a life she knew nothing about. She had just handed him the justification to build it. The first test of his new resolve came less than a week later, at the dreaded Sunday dinner at the estate of his father-in-law, Richard Sterling. The Sterling home was less a house and more a monument to Richard's ego, a sprawling neo-Georgian mansion filled with heavy, dark wood furniture, portraits of stern-faced ancestors they didn't actually have, and an oppressive silence that was only ever broken by the sound of Richard's booming voice or his wife Eleanor's tinkling, nervous laughter. Liam had always hated these dinners. They were weekly rituals of subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, humiliation. He was the court jester they didn't realize they had. As they settled into the dining room, a cavernous space that could have hosted a state dinner, Richard was already holding court. He was a large man, florid and imposing, who believed his success in selling overpriced handbags to the insecure gave him insight into all matters of global importance. "The market's soft, but our new European expansion is going to be a game changer," Richard announced, swirling a deep red wine in a comically large glass. He looked down the table at Liam. "You wouldn't understand the pressures, of course, Liam. Corporate architecture is a safe game. Predictable. You follow the rules, you get your check. There's no real risk, no vision." Liam felt the familiar sting, the casual dismissal that painted him as a passionless cog in a machine. Chloe, sitting beside him, didn't flinch. She just took a delicate sip of her wine, her silence a form of agreement. This was her family's narrative about him, and she was a co-author. "There's a certain elegance to working within constraints, Richard," Liam replied calmly, meeting his gaze. "Sometimes the most creative solutions come from the tightest boxes." Richard let out a short, barking laugh. "Creative solutions? You're designing office parks, son, not the Sistine Chapel." Mark, Chloe's younger brother, snickered. Mark was the family's resident failure, a man who floated from one disastrous business idea to the next, always cushioned by the family's wealth. He saw Liam not as a brother-in-law, but as a rival for the family's resources, a rival he clearly felt he was winning against. "At least Liam has a steady job, Mark," Eleanor chimed in, her attempt at a defense sounding more like an insult. "Unlike your artisanal kombucha for dogs venture." The table laughed, and Mark's face flushed. It was a family sport, punching down, and Liam was always the safest, lowest target. The conversation shifted, but the undertone remained. Liam was the outsider, the charity case, the man who had inexplicably landed a woman far above his station. He ate his perfectly cooked but tasteless meal, feeling the weight of their collective judgment. He wasn't just underestimated, he was actively, deliberately misunderstood. They had created a caricature of him, Liam, the boring architect, and they interacted only with that drawing, never the man. Later, as coffee was served in the grand, suffocating library, Mark cornered him by the fireplace. Mark had a weaselly, desperate energy that Liam found deeply unpleasant. "Hey, Liam, man, I need to talk to you," he began, his voice conspiratorially low. Liam knew what was coming. It was a familiar script. "I've got this incredible opportunity, a new app. It's like Uber, but for, well, it's complicated. But the seed funding is almost there. I just need a little bridge loan to get it over the line. Just $50,000. Liam looked at him. $50,000. To Mark, it was a trifle, a rounding error. To the hours account that Liam diligently funded, it was a significant blow. "Mark, I don't think," Liam started, but Chloe was suddenly at his elbow. Her hand rested on his arm, a gesture that looked supportive but felt like a vice. "Darling," she said, her voice sweet as poison, "Mark is family, and it's an investment in his future. We can manage it from the joint account, can't we? You're so good with the numbers." She wasn't asking. She was instructing. She was performing for her family, showing them that she controlled the family purse strings, the hours purse strings anyway. She was demonstrating her power over him. He looked from Chloe's expectant face to Mark's smug one. They were a team. He was the bank. The old Liam would have argued, would have tried to reason, and would have ultimately caved, exhausted by the emotional pressure. The new Liam saw the chessboard. He saw the move they were making, and he saw the 10 moves he would make in return. "Of course," he said, the words tasting like ash, but his voice betraying nothing. "For family." Mark clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of false camaraderie. Knew I could count on you, pal. Chloe beamed, her social standing as the generous sister and capable wife reaffirmed. Liam felt a cold, hard anger crystallize in his chest. It wasn't hot or explosive. It was a diamond, and he knew with absolute certainty that diamonds can cut through anything. He reached into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing against the smooth, worn leather of his journal. It felt like a weapon. They thought they were taking from him. They had no idea what he was about to take back. The following Tuesday, Chloe came home in a whirlwind of excitement, dropping a glossy, oversized brochure onto the polished granite of their kitchen island. The cover showed a stunning, modern house of glass and cedar, perched on a cliff overlooking a serene, blue lake. "I've found it," she announced, her eyes shining with a possessive fire that Liam had come to recognize. "The lake house, our weekend escape." Liam picked up the brochure. The property was magnificent, a piece of architectural art in its own right. It was also breathtakingly expensive. He flipped to the back, where the price was discreetly printed. It was more than the value of their city apartment. "Chloe, this is a lot," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "How are we planning to manage this?" She waved a dismissive hand, already pouring herself a glass of chilled Sauvignon Blanc. "Oh, don't worry your practical little head about it. Daddy is helping. He's providing the down payment as an early inheritance gift, a very generous one." She took a sip of wine, looking pleased with herself. "The rest I'll mortgage. It's a great investment." Liam felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "So, you'll be mortgaging it?" he asked carefully. "In your name?" "Of course," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "The gift from Daddy is for me. It makes sense for the property to be in my name. It's just cleaner that way. You know how messy things can get." Cleaner. The word hung in the air. She was insulating her assets from him, from their marriage, from the ours. He looked at the brochure again, at the pristine house and the tranquil water. He imagined weekends there. He would be the guest, the glorified handyman, the man who brought his wife's bags in from the car. "But of course," she continued, her voice taking on a magnanimous tone, "we'll both get to enjoy it. It's for us. And the upkeep, the taxes, the maintenance, the new boat I want to get, that can all come from the joint account, the ours fund. See? It's a team effort." There it was again, the rule. Her assets were hers, his assets were theirs. A lake house in her name, funded by her father and her mine account, would be maintained and furnished by his salary. It was the most audacious, most brazen application of her philosophy yet. He saw his future weekends, mowing the lawn of a house he didn't own, fixing a dock for a boat he didn't have a stake in, all while her family praised her for her savvy investment. He felt a surge of something that bordered on nausea. He placed the brochure carefully back on the counter, his movements deliberate. He had to keep the mask in place, the calm, agreeable, slightly dim husband. Any crack in the facade now would be premature. He needed more time. He needed her to be confident, complacent, utterly secure in her dominance. Her arrogance was the sand in which she was burying her head, and he needed her to dig just a little deeper. "It's a beautiful house, Chloe," he said, his voice a masterpiece of feigned admiration. "You have incredible taste." She preened, basking in the compliment. "I know," she said, "and it's going to be our perfect getaway." Our getaway. My liability, he thought. That night he lay awake long after Chloe's soft, even breathing filled the room. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, precise focus. He wasn't just on a chessboard anymore. He was designing the board, carving the pieces, and writing the rules of a new game she didn't even know she was about to play. The next morning he made 2 calls. The first was to a discreet financial investigator, one who specialized in tracing assets and clarifying ownership structures. The second was to his lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Reed. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low and steady as he stood on his office balcony, looking out over the city. It's Liam. We need to restructure, and we need to do it quietly. I want to create a new holding company, completely firewalled, and I want to start moving my personal assets into it, all of them. There was a pause on the other end. Is everything all right, Liam? Evelyn asked, her tone shifting from professional to concerned. Everything is finally becoming clear, Liam replied. He looked down at the street below, at the people scurrying along like ants. From this height, you couldn't tell who was rich and who was poor, who was powerful and who was weak. It was all a matter of perspective, and he was about to fundamentally change Chloe's. A few weeks later, Liam stood on a windswept construction site in the heart of the city's burgeoning financial district. The skeleton of a massive skyscraper clawed at the gray sky, a web of steel and concrete buzzing with the energy of creation. To any casual observer, he was just another architect from a downtown firm, here to observe the techniques being used on a landmark project. He wore a hard hat and a high-vis jacket over his suit, a clipboard in his hand. His day job provided the perfect cover. Chloe believed he was at a tedious seminar on municipal building codes. In reality, he was inspecting his own masterpiece. This was the future European headquarters of Sterling Lifestyle, Richard's company, and it was being designed by Ethelred Designs, the most enigmatic and sought-after architectural firm in the world. Ethelred had no office, no website, no marketing. It was a ghost, a legend whispered about by developers and billionaires. Its founder was anonymous, known only by the Anglo-Saxon moniker he had chosen as a nod to his love of history. Its projects were rare, transformative, and astronomically expensive. And its sole owner and chief designer was Liam, a man in a simple suit and a borrowed hard hat, walking the bones of his own vision. A figure detached itself from a group of site managers and walked toward him. It was Arthur Vance, a distinguished man in his late 60s, with a mane of white hair and eyes that had seen everything the world of architecture had to offer. Arthur was Liam's mentor, his friend, and crucially, the public face of Ethelred Designs. He was the firm's managing director, the seasoned, respectable frontman who handled the contracts and shielded Liam from the publicity he so despised. He's quite the tyrant, your father-in-law, Arthur said, his voice a low rumble against the wind. Sent back the lobby material specs 3 times. Complained the Italian marble wasn't opulent enough. Liam allowed himself a small, wry smile. That sounds like Richard. He thinks opulence can be bought by the pound. He also thinks he's dealing with me, Arthur continued, his gaze sharp. He has no idea that the man he dismisses at his dinner table is the same one redesigning his entire corporate legacy. How long are you going to keep up this charade, Liam? It was one thing when it was about protecting your privacy, your peace of mind. But this is different. She's bleeding you dry. Liam's smile faded. He looked up at the tower, at the elegant, soaring lines that he had first sketched in his leather journal years ago. This building was a statement, a testament to his real capabilities. Yet in his own home, he was treated as a man of no consequence. It's a promise I made to myself, Arthur, Liam said, his voice quiet. After the burnout, after the first firm collapsed under the weight of its own success, I wanted a simple life. I wanted to be judged for who I was, not for what I had. And are you being judged for who you are? Arthur countered, his question gentle but pointed. Or are you being judged for a fiction you've created? They're not seeing the real Liam. They're seeing a shadow you've cast, and they're kicking it because they think it's all there is of you. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of wet concrete and steel. Arthur was right. The experiment had failed. He had wanted to find a partner who loved Liam, the man. Instead, he had found a partner who tolerated Liam, the provider, while openly coveting the wealth and status she believed he lacked. The quiet life he had built for himself had become a cage, and his wife and her family were the zookeepers, rattling the bars for their own amusement. It's almost over, Liam said, more to himself than to Arthur. He turned his back to the tower and looked out over the city. I needed to be sure. I needed to see how far they would push. Now I know. What's your move? Arthur asked. Richard is planning a grand gala to celebrate the project in a few months. He's going to unveil the final model. He wants Mr. Aethelred to be there, of course. He wants me to give a speech. Liam's expression was unreadable, but a new, hard light had entered his eyes. I know, he said, and a speech will be given, but it won't be by you. He looked at his old friend, the man who had guarded his secret for so long. I need you to do something for me, Arthur. I need you to make sure the contract for the Sterling Tower has a standard morality clause, the tightest one you can write. Link it directly to the client's conduct toward all contracted parties, named or unnamed. Arthur's eyebrows rose. A morality clause was common for celebrity endorsements, not for architectural contracts. It was a weapon, and an unusual one. Consider it done, Arthur said, a slow smile spreading across his face. He finally understood. The game wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about revealing the truth. And the truth, Liam knew, was going to be devastating. The day they closed on the lake house was a masterclass in humiliation. Chloe insisted Liam take the day off work, a sacrifice of one of his precious few vacation days, to be present for the signing and the official handover of the keys. The meeting took place not in a sterile lawyer's office, but in Richard Sterling's personal study, a room designed to intimidate. It was paneled in dark mahogany, with a desk the size of a small car and a faint, cloying scent of cigar smoke and self-satisfaction. Richard sat behind the desk like a king on his throne, with his lawyer beside him. Chloe sat in one of the plush leather chairs, radiant and triumphant. Liam was offered a seat slightly to the side, as if he were an assistant or a junior associate. The entire process was a performance for his benefit. Richard made a great show of explaining the financing, emphasizing the scale of his gift to Chloe. The lawyer droned on about title deeds and property taxes, always addressing his remarks to Chloe, occasionally glancing at Liam with an expression of mild pity. Liam said nothing. He simply sat there, a silent observer at the transfer of a property he would be expected to maintain, but never to own. He felt a profound sense of detachment, as if he were watching a film of someone else's life. He could see the scene from the outside, the powerful patriarch, the favored daughter, and the inconsequential husband. They were so confident in their roles, so comfortable in the power dynamic they had established. After the papers were signed and the keys, a heavy, ornate set on a Sterling-branded keychain, were placed in Chloe's hand, Richard leaned back in his chair, a smug look on his face. Well, that's that. Welcome to the world of real estate, my girl, he boomed. Then he turned to Liam. Now, Liam, there are a few things around the property that need seeing to. The previous owners let the dock slip a bit, one of the posts is wobbly, and the automatic sprinkler system is on the fritz. I figured, with your eye for, well, for structure and things, you'd be the perfect man to sort it all out. Give you a good project for your weekends. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a honey-do list, the first of many. He was being assigned his duties as the unpaid groundskeeper of his wife's new estate. Chloe smiled brightly. Oh, that's a wonderful idea, Daddy. Liam is so practical. He'll have it all sorted in no time. Liam met Richard's gaze across the vast desk. He saw the glint of amusement in the older man's eyes. This was part of the price of admission into the Sterling family. You had to know your place. And Liam's place was on his hands and knees, fixing a wobbly post. I'll take a look at it, Liam said, his voice perfectly level. He felt his own power coiling inside him, a sleeping dragon. They were prodding it with sticks, completely unaware of the fire it held. The first weekend at the lake house was even worse than he had imagined. Richard and Eleanor were there, ostensibly to help Chloe settle in. In reality, they were there to supervise. Eleanor arrived with a clipboard and a list of decorative suggestions, which were, in fact, orders. Richard followed Liam around, offering unsolicited advice as Liam inspected the dock. "You need to use galvanized bolts there, son. Don't cheap out," he'd say, while Liam was examining a support beam that was clearly rotten and needed complete replacement, not just new bolts. Liam was treated not as a guest or a family member, but as a contractor. Chloe, caught up in the excitement of her new possession, floated through the house, directing the placement of furniture and planning future parties, completely oblivious to the dynamic playing out between her husband and her father. At one point, Eleanor handed Liam a list. "Liam, dear," she said, not looking up from an interior design magazine, "while you're in town getting supplies, could you pick these up? And Chloe mentioned the guest bathroom toilet is running. You're good with that sort of thing, aren't you?" Liam looked at the list. It was a grocery list. He was being sent on errands. He was the help. He took the list without a word. As he drove to the small town's hardware store in his modest sedan, a stark contrast to the gleaming new convertible Chloe had bought with her latest mine bonus, he felt a sense of profound peace. This was the bottom. This was the final piece of evidence he needed. He was not angry. He was done. He had given them every chance to see him, to respect him, to treat him as an equal. They had failed every test. As he paid for the galvanized bolts Richard had insisted on, along with the far more expensive marine-grade lumber and stainless steel fittings he knew were actually required, he made another call. "Evelyn," he said, his voice quiet but firm amidst the clatter of the store. "The gala for the Sterling Tower. I need to know the exact date, and I need you to prepare the final paperwork. All of it. The corporate dissolution, the asset separation, the petition. Yes, the full package." He hung up the phone. The cashier handed him his change. "Have a good one," the man said with a simple, human kindness that felt more genuine than anything Liam had experienced all weekend. "You too," Liam replied, and for the first time in a long time, he knew that he would. The storm was coming, and he was not just ready for it, he was directing it. The night of the Sterling Lifestyle Gala was the pinnacle of Richard Sterling's career, and he had made sure the world knew it. The event was held in the city's most prestigious ballroom, a cavernous space dripping with crystal chandeliers and floral arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A string quartet played softly in the corner, the very picture of refined elegance. The guest list was a who's who of the city's business and social elite, all there to witness Richard's triumph and to get a first look at the architectural model of his new headquarters. The air was thick with expensive perfume, self-congratulation, and the low hum of networking. Liam and Chloe arrived, and Chloe was immediately in her element. She wore a stunning, backless gown of emerald green silk, a dress from her Mine collection. She moved through the crowd with the practiced grace of a born aristocrat, accepting compliments, laughing at the right jokes, her hand resting possessively on Liam's arm. To the outside world, they were a power couple. He, the handsome, understated husband, the solid ground to her glittering star. Liam, in a perfectly tailored but unshowy dark suit, was a model of quiet support. He smiled, he nodded, he shook hands, playing his part to perfection. But inside, he was a coiled spring. His mind was a quiet, still room in the midst of a hurricane. He observed everything, the way Richard basked in the adulation, the way Eleanor fluttered nervously at his side, the way Mark was already trying to pitch his latest doomed venture to a trapped banking executive. He saw Arthur Vance across the room, holding court with a group of developers. Arthur, the public face of Aethelred Designs, was a celebrity tonight. He caught Liam's eye and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The stage was set. Everything was in place. Liam found a quiet spot near the French doors that led to a balcony, a glass of sparkling water in his hand. He watched Chloe charming a group of fashion journalists, her laughter bright and artificial. She glanced over at him and gave him a little wave, a gesture that said, "Stay put, look pleasant, don't embarrass me." He felt nothing. The emotional connection he had once fought so hard to preserve had been cauterized, leaving only a clean surgical scar. This was the quiet before the storm. He could feel the pressure in the air, the buildup of static electricity before a lightning strike. He savored the moment, the final seconds of their shared fiction. He thought of all the slights, the 1,000 tiny cuts of disrespect that had led to this night. Richard mocking his safe job, Mark's loan, Eleanor's grocery list, Chloe's constant casual condescension, culminating in her golden rule. What's mine is mine, what's yours is ours. He reached into his inner jacket pocket. His fingers didn't find his leather journal this time. They found a single, slim envelope. Inside it was a key, a simple, unassuming key. It was the key to his real office, a sprawling, light-filled studio in a discreetly converted warehouse downtown, the place where Aethelred Designs truly lived. It was the key to his real life. Soon, everyone would see it. Finally, the moment arrived. The string quartet fell silent, and a hush fell over the room. Richard Sterling strode to the podium on the stage, his chest puffed out, his face beaming. He launched into a long, rambling speech, filled with cliches about vision, legacy, and the Sterling family's commitment to excellence. Liam listened, his expression impassive. Richard was building his own pedestal, making it as high as he possibly could. It would only make the fall more spectacular. And this vision, Richard boomed, his voice echoing through the vast room, required a home, not just a building, but a statement, a landmark that would carry the Sterling name into the next century. To achieve that, we needed the best. Not one of the best, the best. And so we secured the most exclusive, most visionary architectural firm on the planet. Aethelred Designs. A ripple of impressed murmurs went through the crowd. On a signal from Richard, two assistants pulled a velvet cloth off a large table in the center of the stage. There it was, a magnificent, intricately detailed model of the Sterling Tower. It was breathtaking. The design was bold, elegant, and utterly unique, a twisting column of glass and light that seemed to defy gravity. The crowd gasped, then broke into enthusiastic applause. Richard let the applause wash over him, a conquering hero. He then gestured towards Arthur Vance. And we are honored to have the genius behind Aethelred, Mr. Arthur Vance, with us tonight. Arthur stood and gave a polite, modest bow. Richard's eyes scanned the crowd, a predator seeking its next victim for a display of dominance. His gaze landed on Liam. A cruel, dismissive smile touched his lips. This was too perfect. He would cap his moment of triumph by reminding everyone of his son-in-law's lowly status. My son-in-law Liam is also an architect, Richard announced, his voice dripping with condescension. The crowd's attention shifted to Liam. He could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on him. Chloe, standing near the stage, stiffened slightly, a flash of apprehension in her eyes. Liam, come on up here for a second, Richard commanded. It was not a request. Liam calmly placed his water glass on a passing waiter's tray and made his way toward the stage. He moved with an unhurried grace that seemed to unnerve Richard for a split second. Tell us, son, Richard said, clapping a heavy hand on Liam's shoulder as he reached the edge of the stage. As a man who designs, office parks? What does a corporate drone architect think of a true masterpiece like this? The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone was waiting for the punchline. They were waiting for Liam to stammer, to be intimidated, to offer some meek, fawning praise. They were waiting for the jester to perform his trick. Chloe was holding her breath, her knuckles white as she gripped her clutch. Liam looked not at Richard, but at the model. He walked slowly around the table, his eyes taking in every detail, every line, every impossibly small, perfect joint. He let the silence stretch, drawing it out until it was taut and humming. Finally, he stopped. He turned to face Richard, his expression calm, his eyes clear and direct. It's a bold design, Liam began, his voice quiet but carrying in the stillness. Ambitious, but there's a flaw. A collective intake of breath swept through the ballroom. Richard's smile froze on his face, turning into a grotesque mask of disbelief. A, a flaw? He stammered, his voice losing its booming confidence. What are you talking about? It's perfect. Liam gestured toward the model's north-facing facade. The cantilevered observation deck on the 48th floor, he said, his voice as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. The design calls for a triple laminated glass balustrade to preserve the view, but the current structural load calculations for the primary steel support beneath it don't account for the harmonic resonance that will be generated by wind shear at that specific altitude and angle. In a 70-mile-per-hour wind, it will vibrate. In a 90-mile-per-hour wind, it will shatter. The level of detail was staggering. The technical language was irrefutable. This was not the opinion of a corporate drone. This was the intimate knowledge of a creator. Richard stared at him, his face turning from red to a pasty, mottled white. The crowd was utterly silent, stunned. Arthur Vance, standing in the front row, had a slow, satisfied smile spreading across his face. Chloe looked as if she had been struck by lightning. How could you possibly know that? Richard whispered, the question hanging in the dead air. Liam finally looked him in the eye. The mask was gone. For the first time, the entire Sterling family and all their friends and associates were seeing the real Liam, and he was terrifying. I know that, Liam said, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone that was somehow more powerful than a shout. Because I'm the one who found the error in my own design 2 weeks ago. And I'm the one who issued the revised structural drawings to your engineering team yesterday morning. He paused, letting the implication land with the force of a physical blow. Then he delivered the final, devastating sentence. My name is Liam Thorne, and I am Aethelred. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the ballroom was the faint hum of the ventilation system. The collective shock was a physical presence, a thick, unbreathable atmosphere. Richard Sterling stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape, his face a canvas of dawning horror. Mark, standing beside his mother, looked like a fish gasping for air. Eleanor's hand was pressed to her chest, her carefully constructed composure shattering like a dropped vase. But Liam's eyes were on Chloe. She stood rooted to the spot, her emerald dress suddenly looking garish against her pale skin. Her expression was a kaleidoscope of confusion, disbelief, and a terrifying, nascent understanding. She was cycling through every interaction they'd ever had, every dismissive comment, every condescending smile, and seeing it all through a new, horrifying lens. The doodling book, the safe job, the practical little head, it was all a lie she had told herself. Liam let the silence do its work. Then he turned his attention back to Richard, who was now sputtering, trying to regain control. This is a joke, a ridiculous, pathetic joke. Arthur, he yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Liam's mentor. Tell them this is insane. Arthur Vance stepped forward, his expression one of grim satisfaction. He addressed not Richard, but the captivated audience. For 7 years, I have had the honor of serving as the managing director for Aethelred Designs, he announced, his voice ringing with authority. My primary role has been to protect the founder's identity, allowing him the peace and privacy he requires to create. Tonight, it seems that protection is no longer necessary. I can confirm that the man standing before you, Mr. Liam Thorne, is the founder, sole owner, and chief designer of Aethelred Designs. He is, in every sense of the word, Aethelred. The confirmation sent a new shockwave through the room. The whispers started, low at first, then growing in volume. It was a scandal, a drama, a revelation of epic proportions. The jester had just revealed he was the king. Liam held up a hand, and the room fell silent again. He had their complete, undivided attention. "For 5 years," he began, his voice steady and devoid of malice, yet carrying an immense weight, "I have been a member of the Sterling family. In that time, I have been patiently and consistently reminded of my place." He looked directly at Richard. "I was told my work was safe and lacked vision. I was told I designed office parks, not masterpieces." He then turned his gaze to Mark. "I was asked for, and gave, a $50,000 loan from our joint funds for a business venture that, like all the others, will surely fail. Money I earned was treated as a family slush fund." His eyes found Eleanor. "I was given grocery lists and tasked with fixing toilets at a property I was not deemed worthy of co-owning." Finally, his gaze settled on Chloe. Her face had crumpled, tears beginning to trace paths through her expensive makeup. "And from my wife," he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, which only made the words more brutal. "I learned a very important rule, a rule she stated so clearly just a few months ago. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is ours." He let the phrase hang in the air, a perfect echo of that moment in their living room. He could see the memory dawning on her face, the horror of her own words being used as a weapon against her. "I have decided," Liam continued, his voice resonating with a calm, chilling finality, "to apply that rule, fully and equally. It seems only fair." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the slim envelope. He opened it and let the single key fall into his palm. "What's mine," he said, holding up the key, "is a design firm with a current valuation of 9 figures. It is a portfolio of private investments that dwarfs the Sterling family fortune. It is my talent, my name, and my self-respect. All of this is mine, and as of this morning, it is all held in a trust that you cannot touch." He then looked at Chloe, his eyes holding a universe of disappointment. "What's yours, Chloe, is your salary, your new car, the jewelry you wear, the clothes you buy, and a lake house with a very large mortgage and a very wobbly dock. All of that is yours." The crowd was mesmerized. This was better than any theater. This was real, raw, human drama. "And what's ours?" Liam said, finishing the devastating syllogism. "The ours account, the one I funded at a rate of 92% for the last 5 years, has been audited. Our respective contributions have been calculated to the penny. Your share has been transferred to your personal account. My share has been moved to mine. The ours account, as of this evening, is closed." He paused, then delivered the coup de grace, turning back to a shell-shocked Richard. "And finally, the Sterling Tower. It's a magnificent project. Unfortunately, my contract with Aethelred Designs contains a morality clause, a clause that voids the agreement in the event of personal or professional misconduct on the part of the client toward any member of my team. And as you have so publicly demonstrated tonight, you have treated my firm's lead designer with contempt and disrespect. The contract is therefore void, effective immediately." He turned and looked at Arthur. "Arthur, please ensure their deposit is refunded, minus our initial consultation fee. We are no longer associated with this project." With that, he placed the key back in his pocket, gave a single final nod to the stunned room, and walked off the stage. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The storm had broken, and he was walking away into the calm, leaving the wreckage behind him. The immediate aftermath was chaos. As Liam walked calmly through the ballroom towards the exit, a path parting before him as if he were a prophet, the spell of silence broke behind him. Shouts erupted. Richard Sterling, his face purple with rage and humiliation, was screaming at Arthur Vance, who simply stood his ground, unmoved. "You can't do this. We have a contract. I'll sue you. I'll sue everyone," Richard bellowed, his dignity stripped away, revealing the panicked, bullying core of the man. Mark, ever the opportunist, was already on his phone, likely trying to short his own father's company's stock before the news hit the markets. But it was Chloe's reaction that was the most dramatic. She stumbled forward as Liam passed, her hand reaching for his arm. "Liam, wait, please," she cried, her voice ragged with desperation. He stopped but didn't turn fully toward her. He just looked at her over his shoulder. "Liam, I didn't know," she sobbed, tears flowing freely now. "Why didn't you tell me? We can fix this. I can fix this." Her words were telling. Not, "we need to talk," but, "I can fix this." Even in her desperation, her first instinct was to manage the problem, to control the situation, to salvage her own status. She saw the loss of the money, the loss of the prestige. She had not yet begun to understand the real loss, the loss of trust, of love, of the man who had quietly stood by her side. "There is nothing to fix, Chloe," Liam said, his voice gentle but firm, the voice one uses for a stranger. "The rule was your own. I'm just enforcing it." "But it wasn't supposed to be like this," she wailed, her voice attracting more stares. "It was just a thing I said. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything," Liam corrected her softly. "It meant you saw our marriage as a business, where you held all the equity and I held all the liability. You saw me as a resource, not a partner. You were so busy looking at price tags that you forgot to see the value." He finally turned to face her fully. He saw the beautiful, shattered woman before him, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a pang of the love he used to have for her. But it was like feeling a phantom limb. The connection itself was gone. "I'm sorry you're hurting, Chloe," he said, and he meant it. He took no joy in her pain. This was not about revenge for him. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming his own life. "But this is the consequence of your choices, of all of your choices." He gestured vaguely back at her father, who was now being restrained by two of his own security guards. "Your family built a world based on judging people by their perceived net worth. You're all about to find out what it feels like to be on the other side of that judgment." He turned and continued his walk to the exit. No one tried to stop him this time. As the large ballroom doors swung shut behind him, cutting off the sounds of shouting and crying, he took his first breath of clean, free air. He was alone, but for the first time in 5 years, he wasn't lonely. He walked out into the cool night, under a sky full of indifferent stars, and felt the immense, crushing weight he had been carrying for years simply dissolve into the darkness. The fiction was over. His real life was just beginning. The days that followed were a blur of legal maneuvers and seismic shifts. The news of the Sterling Tower contract being voided, and the shocking reason behind it, spread through the business community like a wildfire. Sterling Lifestyle's stock plummeted. Richard, exposed as a fool and a bully, was forced to step down as CEO by his own board of directors, who were terrified of the fallout. The brand built on an image of elite sophistication was now a laughingstock, a case study in corporate hubris. Liam remained insulated from it all. He worked from his sun-drenched studio, a space of calm creativity filled with books, models, and the scent of drafting paper. Arthur and Evelyn handled the onslaught, filtering the few messages that needed his attention. The most persistent messages, of course, came from Chloe. First, there were the texts, dozens of them, a frantic stream of consciousness swinging between rage, pleading, and accusations. "How could you do this to me? To US?" one would read, followed minutes later by, "I miss you. Please come home. We can talk." Then came the voicemails, her voice growing more desperate with each one. She tried to bargain. "I'll sell the lake house," she offered in one message. "I'll put the money into a joint account, a real one this time. We can start over." She didn't understand that it was never about the money. It was about the mindset that had made the money an issue in the first place. Finally, about a week after the gala, she showed up at his studio. Arthur had warned him she was downstairs, but Liam had told him to let her up. He knew this confrontation was inevitable. She stepped into the vast, open space and stopped, looking around in awe. This was his real world, his sanctuary. It was larger, more beautiful, and more real than any space she had ever associated with him. She saw the models of his past projects, a winery in Napa, a private museum in Kyoto, a research institute in the Swiss Alps. The scale of his secret life was laid bare, and it overwhelmed her. "Liam," she began, her voice small. She was dressed down in simple jeans and a sweater, a calculated attempt at humility. I was wrong. I was so wrong." "Yes, you were," he said, not unkindly. He was sitting at a large drafting table, a pencil in his hand. He didn't get up. He was making her come to him, reversing the dynamic of their entire relationship. She walked slowly toward him, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. "I was arrogant," she said, her voice cracking. "I was blind. I took you for granted. I was raised to think that way, to think about status and money, and I let it poison everything." It was the most honest thing he had ever heard her say. A part of him wanted to believe her, to see the glimmer of redemption. "I love you, Liam," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes again. "I always have. I lost my way. Please, give me another chance. Give us another chance." Liam finally put his pencil down and looked up at her. He studied her face, searching for the woman he had married. He saw her, but he also saw everything that had happened since. He saw the condescending smiles, the silent complicity, the list of chores. He saw the fundamental, unbridgeable gap in their values. "Do you love me, Chloe?" he asked quietly. "Or do you love what I can give you? Do you love the man who quietly paid the bills? Or do you love the man who can design skyscrapers? Because you treated them very differently." She flinched as if he had struck her. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" he countered. "The man you thought I was, the steady, unremarkable architect, you didn't respect him. You tolerated him. You used him as a foundation for the life you wanted, a life you never intended to fully share with him. You only started to love him again when you found out he was secretly a king." He stood up and walked to the massive window that overlooked the city. "The trust is broken, Chloe, and trust is like the foundation of a building. Once it's cracked, you can't just patch it up. The entire structure is compromised. You have to tear it down and start over. And I'm not willing to build on that same flawed ground again." Her face fell. She finally understood. This was not a negotiation. It was a verdict. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Now," Liam said, turning back to her, "you apply your rule. What's yours is yours. You have your family, your career, such as it is, and the assets you protected so carefully. You'll be fine. And what's mine is mine. My work, my future, and my peace. I'm moving on, Chloe, and I suggest you do the same." She stood there for a long moment, the tears finally drying on her face, replaced by a look of bleak acceptance. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the vast, quiet space where Liam's new life was being built. 6 months passed, the seasons changed, and the city moved on, as it always does. The story of the Sterling Gala became a piece of corporate folklore, a cautionary tale told in boardrooms and bars. Sterling Lifestyle, under new leadership, had rebranded and was slowly, painfully trying to recover. The half-finished skeleton of the Sterling Tower project was eventually sold at a loss to another developer, a constant, rusting reminder of Richard's hubris. Liam thrived. Freed from the weight of his double life, he poured all his energy into his work. Aethelred Designs took on a new public persona. It was still exclusive, but it was no longer anonymous. Liam gave interviews, appeared on the covers of architectural magazines, and became a leading voice in his field. He was happier, lighter, more himself than he had been in years. He had dinner with Arthur once a week, and their friendship deepened. He reconnected with old friends he had neglected. He started dating, cautiously at first, then with a growing sense of hope. He was building a new life on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. One crisp autumn afternoon, he was sitting at an outdoor cafe in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood when he saw her. Chloe was walking on the other side of the street, She looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple, elegant style that seemed more authentic. Her hair was different. Her makeup was minimal. She was carrying a portfolio case, not $1,000 handbag. She looked like a person, not a brand. She didn't see him. She walked into a small, independent art gallery a few doors down. On a whim, Liam paid his bill and followed. He stood in the doorway of the gallery, watching her. She was talking to the owner, gesturing to a series of striking, abstract paintings on the wall. They were vibrant, emotional, and full of a raw energy. "The artist has a real, unique voice," the gallery owner was saying. "We think she has a bright future." Chloe smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that Liam hadn't seen in years. "Thank you," she said. "It's been a long road." She turned then and saw him standing there. For a moment, her smile faltered, and a flicker of the old panic crossed her face. But then it settled into something new. Resignation, perhaps, or just peace. She excused herself from the owner and walked over to him. "Liam," she said, her voice even, "what are you doing here?" "I saw you from across the street," he said, gesturing toward the paintings. "Are these—" "They're mine," she said, a quiet pride in her voice. "After everything, I lost my job. My father blames me for the company's collapse. He's not wrong. My family, well, we're not close anymore. I had nothing, so I started painting again. It was the only thing I had left that was truly mine." There was no bitterness in her voice, only a weary acceptance. She had lost the world she had worshipped, and in the rubble, she had found a small piece of herself. "They're beautiful, Chloe," he said, and he meant it. "They're full of life." "I had to sell the lake house," she continued, as if needing to complete the ledger. "The mortgage was impossible. I sold the car, the watches, all of it. I live in a small apartment now. It's quiet." She looked at him, her eyes clear for the first time he could remember. "You were right, Liam, about everything. I was a terrible person, and a fool. I spent my whole life chasing things that glittered, and I couldn't see the gold right in front of me. I'm sorry, not because I want anything from you, just because you deserved an apology. You deserve better." This was it, the final quiet beat of the story. Not a dramatic confrontation, but a moment of sad, clear-eyed truth. He saw the change in her. She had been humbled, broken even, but she was rebuilding herself from a more honest place. He knew, however, that it didn't change the past. The cracks in their foundation were still there. "Thank you for saying that, Chloe," he said. "I wish you all the best with your art. I really do." He extended a hand. It was a gesture of peace, of closure. She took it, her grip firm. It wasn't the hand of a wife, but of a person he once knew, a person who was now a stranger on her own path. "You too, Liam," she said, letting go. He gave her a final nod and walked out of the gallery, back into the autumn sunlight. He didn't feel triumph or vindication. He felt a quiet, profound sense of resolution. The story wasn't about her fall, it was about his rise. It was about his choice to demand the respect he had always deserved. As we've seen, true worth isn't about what you own or what you earn. It's about who you are, the integrity you carry, and the respect you have for yourself and for others. Liam's story is a powerful reminder that you should never let anyone else define your value. Sometimes the quietest people have the most to say, and the strongest foundations are the ones you build for yourself, on your own terms. What do you think? Was Liam's response justified, or was it too harsh? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Every relationship has its rules, spoken or unspoken. The most important one is to make sure those rules are built on a foundation of mutual respect. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you found value in this story, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that make you think and feel. Until next time, remember to be the architect of your own life.